Oui.
So, dear friends, welcome to this panel. So, we're a little bit late because people in the first panel they spoke a little bit too much. So, there is no definition of extremist. And I don't think that what is extremist in Asia is the same that in Europe. So, what we're going to do, the panelists will explain about the specificity of in Europe of Asia, and they will speak 10 minutes. And at the end of the panel, people would ask, if they have questions, they would ask through the chat, but not for Dr. Jean-Yves Camus because he have a meeting in 1 hour. So we are going to give the floor right now to Dr. Jean-Yves Camus, who is the director of Observatory of Political Radicalism of the Jean Jaurès Foundation. And he will speak about the far-right extremists in France. And if you have questions, please, short question by the chat. Please, Mr. Camus, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. As you said before, there is no definition of the extreme right upon which a majority of scholars do agree. Neither in the United States nor in Europe. Nevertheless, when it comes to the French case, extreme right was used and is still used since the 1970s to describe a specific political party, which is the Front National, now renamed into National Rally, Rassemblement National. But there are also a number of small fringe movements right of the Front National, which I must say, when it comes to political violence against minorities, especially, whether it be the Muslim minority or the Jewish minority, are certainly much more dangerous than the National Rally, which is a legal political party which refrains from any kind of violent activities. There's been a change with regard to this. We used to have some problems with some rank and file people within the National Front back in the 1990s because they were violent and violent against the press, violent against minorities, violence against the police. But the party very soon realized that this was very bad publicity and decided to expel some of the most violent activists and do whatever was necessary to stop this kind of political violence. So we are now left with, there is no official figure, but we are left with, I would say, 3,000 people who more or less belong to those small fringe movements on the right of the National Rally, and who do not seek to gain power through elections, but are only focused on overthrowing democracy and attacking whoever is, in their eyes, an enemy of theirs. That means, of course, Muslims, the Jews, the Freemasons, LGBT people, and everyone who is more or less connected to what they believe is the left. One very important thing is that over the last 5 years, since Emmanuel Macron was elected to the presidency, the police and the security services have unfolded no less than 7 terrorist plots from the violent extreme right. None of those plots was in a very advanced stage of planning. It was much talk and some kind of preparatory work, but nevertheless, it's the first time. I've been studying this field for more than 30 years, and I must say, this is the first time I see such a surge of violence or would-be violence directed not only at minorities, but this is something new, directed at the state, as an institution, directed at the presidency with the target of shooting the president, killing him, killing some of the prominent politicians from both the left hand of the political spectrum, but also from the right hand of the political spectrum. So the security services pay much attention nowadays to the extreme right. They used to be focused only on the Islamic radical networks, but they have realized that they must devote some of their energy to the extreme right as well. So that's 3,000 people, excuse me. And what is new, I would say, with regard to the sociology of those people, is that they used to be, the majority of them used to be young people. I would say young people between the age of 18 and the age of 30, skinheads, neo-Nazi activists, neo-fascists, and so on. But those people who were indicted in the 7 cases of terrorism I just spoke about have a very different profile. What is striking, and I would say very much worrying, is that, first point, a lot of those people have served in the military or in the police. That's a new trend. Second trend, some of them, a minority, but still, some of them are women. This is something new. And third, quite a high proportion of those people are 50, 60, up to 69. And we even have the case of a guy who fired at a mosque in southwestern France. He was a former member of the National Front, and he was 84. And I mean, he shot at worshippers at the mosque, and when the police came to arrest him, he also shot at the police. So that's a very different profile. Many of those indicted in those cases were not from the fringe of society. They did have a job. They had a family. They were well off. They were not marginals or people who had objective reasons to be angry at society, other than this feeling of being dispossessed of their country, of being swamped by immigration from Muslim countries. This idea of the grand remplacement, great replacement, has now made its way into not only the extreme right, but some of the mainstream right politics. And finally, something very, very interesting is that the level of violence that those would-be terrorists wanted to perpetrate is really something new. It was not only about shouting people. It was, for example, in one of those cases, their aim was to put some poisonous substances into halal food in supermarkets so that customers who would buy this food would get intoxicated and certainly would have died from eating this. So killing imams, killing worshippers at mosques, killing people who eat halal, regardless of the fact that, of course, they are not extremist radicals involved in any kind of conspiracy or violent militancy, is something that really is a change from what we used to have, what we used to know back in the 1990s, for example. Another thing I would like to stress is that we have many violent people on the extreme right who take their ideas and their ideology from the United States. When you look at their ideas, you have some kind of white supremacism, you have also this idea of the war of races, you have this specificity of trying to act according to what is called leaderless resistance, which means that you do not act within a big group with a formal hierarchy, but you act with one or two people who form a very small cell, which is not interconnected with other cells and who do not take orders from above. Basically, you are in charge of doing your own white jihad and choosing your targets and choosing the moment you will take action. So ideologically, it's very curious to see that those people all say that they are French nationalists, but in fact, they import their ideology most of the time, 99% of the time, from the United States, which they despise, because the United States, according to him, means the melting pot, the multicultural society, decadency in terms of moral values, but nevertheless, they more or less copycat whatever is done in the American extremist scene. Finally, just to give you a short insight into the responses, we have had several trials of those people. Last week, one of those activists who planned to kill politicians was given a 9-year sentence. Well, it's pretty much, I would say it's pretty harsh. We also have several pending cases that will come to court probably in 2021, 2022. And what is more interesting, the intelligence services are very much into other inquiries. And I do believe that in the forthcoming weeks or in the forthcoming months, there will be more arrests made, especially in this specific subgroup of the extreme right that believes in conspiracy theories linked with the pandemic. That's something very new. We have a group of people who took advantage of the pandemic to spread conspiracy theories and say, well, because the government has become so oppressive, because the government wants to keep track of all the citizens and have them have what we call the sanitary pass, which is aimed at showing that you got vaccinated. This is becoming a totalitarian state, and we must do whatever it takes to overthrow this government. So this specific brand of right-wing extremism associated with conspiracy and the pandemic is something totally new that we do not yet have finished to cope with. And that's basically the end of my talk.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Camus. Do you have any question? Very quickly question. No. Okay. So thank you, Dr. Camus. And now we are going to Italy. To Italy with Dr. Anna Castriota, who is the research fellow in St. Church College in Oxford, and she will speak about the rise of far right, populism and xenophobic racism in Italy. Please, Anna.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm really sorry to push forward, but talking about sanitary passport, I'm flying tomorrow to Italy and I have to get this antigenic test before flying. So it's everything coming up in a way. Anyway, so I will keep to the point, 10 minutes. I actually was thinking of what Jean-Yves just said earlier about France, and then the situation is very similar to what is happening in Italy, at least in the last couple of years, between 2018 and I will stretch up to 2021, i.e. the current year we are living in. Maybe the difference with France is that in Italy, the political culture never had a proper closure with the fascist past. Historically speaking, in Italy, after the end of the war, the new democratic government pardoned the former fascists, allowed them to form a legal party that sat in the parliament. So in other words, Italians have never made the kind of like historical kind of like closure with their fascist past. Many of them have been recycled in the new democratic system. This kind of attitude has kept happening throughout all those 70 years since the end of World War II. Nowadays, what we do have, like in France, is a worrying kind of like a picture of extremism, far-right extremism, that, like in France, is actually channeled or represented partly by legitimate political parties like Lega and Fratelli d'Italia, Brothers of Italy, who are overtly, let's say, and sometimes covertly far right. Like, in other words, they play the card of nationalism quite often, then they play down the card of nationalism when they are accused. In overall, the whole country, we have been witnessing a rising kind of like a xenophobic and racist attitude of the local population towards the immigrants, especially immigrants coming from African countries and Muslim countries. So alongside the xenophobia is very much open the Islamophobia that Italian average Joe would actually express towards somebody that is Muslim, although Italy, compared to France, has a very kind of low number of Muslim living or settled in the country. On the other side, in 2018, the Lega like say interior minister, somebody called Matteo Salvini, actually issued a legislation called as Salvini law, quite harsh and quite nationalist, let's say, on immigration law. At the moment, what it is very much discussed is the use soli, like in other words, the possibility to give to second or third generation children of immigrants who are settled in Italy through visa or other kind of like residence permit, the Italian nationalities. At this moment, we cannot, the Italian law cannot actually guarantee this to this younger generation of immigrants, which is something that has been discussed. There have been some amendments to the Salvini law, but the latest kind of like problems that we had of public order following the massive protests that happened in the last weeks in Rome, Trieste, Genoa, Bologna, and all other kind of like big centers in Italy due to the anti-vax or the anti-mask kind of like people, has created a sort of like a shortcut, especially a short circuit, actually, sorry, as Jean-Yves was saying about France. We have at the moment a new type of far right that is rising in Italy as well, which mixes a conspiracy theory, fascism, and let's say some sort of like very loose understanding of democracy and right to demonstrate combined together. This is a model, as Jean-Yves has actually pointed out already, that, and I agree with that, that has been imported from the United States. In Italy in specific, we have the presence of Steve Bannon, that is a notorious, basically, master of the alt-right in the United States, that in the past, last year, tried to set up a center study or campus, Dignitas Humanitatis, in just outside Rome, in which it was creating alongside Benjamin Harstall, a British far-right representative. They wanted to create a sort of like university for alternative philosophical and political thought. The whole thing crashed because Italian authorities eventually did not renew the renting of the Benedictine 12th century Benedictine abbey, in which they wanted to create this university. Nevertheless, Steve Bannon is behind, at least we have the evidence that is behind the organization of the Lega and Fratelli d'Italia political kind of like framework nowadays, and somehow they've influenced the mass protest that has been led in against the vaccine, that has been led in Italy by former far-right terrorists like Roberto Fiore, for instance, leader of the, at the time during the 70s, far-right terrorism season or third position, and other kind of like far-right or former terrorist, 1970s terrorist leaders that now have taken on board the protest against the vaccine and the green pass, as it's called in Italy. This is like sanitary pass that you need to have in order to move around. What is interesting is that they have this new kind of far right that is, or rise of right that is actually taking place in Italy, has taken some of the ideas of freedom against the tyranny, which is the establishment, and they are still maintaining anti-immigrants kind of like position. Like in the first stage of the pandemic last year, Chinese immigrants have been targeted heavily with racist comments, damage to their shops or housing. But what is worrying mostly, and this is the kind of like, in a sense, they are importing this model from United States, is actually the American QAnon kind of like model of conspiracy theory against the deep state that is actually manipulating and using us as a sort of like guinea pigs in injecting a like let's say a little bit like a dodgy kind of vaccine and all this kind of like a narrative that have been taken from United States mainly. So I agree with Jean-Yves that the far right in Italy now is changing slightly kind of like morphology, is becoming more vague in a sense. You have still the neo-Nazis with swastika tattooed and with anti-Semitic and Islamophobic and anti-immigrants kind or nationalist kind of issues. Alongside, you have now a new type of extremist, far-right extremist that is using pandemic to put forward his idea of rebellion against the establishment. 2 weeks ago, the former terrorist, neo-fascist terrorist Roberto Fiore, alongside one of his comrades of his group, Forza Nuova, basically led the savaging and storming of the headquarters of a left-wing Italian trade union. He's been arrested under the accusation of terrorism, and we also have in Italy in recent weeks some reports by the Italian police that has arrested and dismantled a network of anti-vax with nationalist far-right kind of like imprinting, that they were planning terrorist attacks on the vaccine hubs present in different countries, in different parts of different cities in the country, and were planning to commit a terrorist attack against relevant virologists or official doctors, basically, that were dealing with the pandemic. So in conclusion, I can say that in Italy, there hasn't been an improvement in matter of racism or xenophobia against the immigrants. Actually, this has been reinforced by the pandemic, used by the pandemic or the anti-vax leadership that has managed to manipulate and convince the general public that is joined this kind of anti-vax movement within the framework of far-right coordinates or neo-fascist coordinates, very much taking into account also and using the modus operandi of the American 21st century far right. So let's say the storming of the Italian trade unions headquarters in Rome is the copycat, basically, of what happened in Washington on the 6th of January 2021. So we have a new type of far right that is very much similar to the American model rather than the consolidated European one. That's it. I finished.
Thank you, Anna. 10 minutes, no more. It was very good. So,
well, I tried.
Yes, but
there is very much to say, obviously, but we have to stick to 10 minutes.
Especially for Italian people.
Oh, come on. This is like a cliche.
So do you have any question? People have any question to Anna because she must to left?
Yeah, I have to go now and have this kind of antigenic test because otherwise I cannot travel.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Anna, there is a difference between the South and North Italia.
Yes.
On this topic.
Yes, because in the South, paradoxically, the South is traditionally more fascist.
Yeah.
But like we are talking about, like, let's say, historical fascism. They're very much more neo-fascist, nostalgic of Mussolini, authoritarianism, that kind of stuff. The North is much more red, in inverted commas, and much more leftist, also because of the history of the partisans, the Salo Republic. So they have a different relationship with fascism. What is interesting, however, is that all these recent kind of like mass movements against the vaccine led by these neo-fascist or former terrorist fascists like Roberto Fiore are actually more, they occur much more from Rome up, not in the South. Maybe this is due to the fact that Italian from the South, I include myself because I'm from the South, we are a little bit more lazy and we cannot be bothered. But the kind of like a mass movement or anti-vax movement that we've been registering lately in Italy is very much taking place more from Rome up in the north rather than in the south. I don't have any kind of like recollection or records or evidence of the same kind of like type of demonstration. I mean, I don't know, in my hometown, they try to do the same demonstration, they turn up only 2 people. So to tell you, yeah, while in Rome, they were actually accusing of act of vandalism, and they were using all the Bologna, Milan, Genoa. So they basically, those were hot spots in the last weeks in which this new far right has taken over the protest against the vaccine and the Green Pass.
Thank you. So we are sorry, but Mr. Ruslan Bortnik cannot come because he has the COVID. So he sent us.
I'm sorry.
He sent a message that he cannot participate. So now we are going to Germany with Dr. Dmitry Stratievsky.
Sorry, before you carry on, I have to apologize and leave you because I need to go to the anti-COVID center and have this antigen, which I have to pay for, obviously.
Okay.
Sorry guys, and I hope to find a proceeding soon because I'm very interested in what all the other participants are going to say. We are in this together. I mean, basically, this is what I think.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome and have a nice trip for tomorrow.
Well, I hope so. Bye-bye. I'm leaving.
Bye.
Bye.
So, Dr. Dmitry Stravinsky, is the director of the Berlin Center for Eastern European Studies, and we had the floor to speak about the COVID-19 and the connection to the radical right in Germany. Please.
Да, здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги. Германия не является исключением. С началом пандемии COVID-19 и у нас появились системные противники.
Germany is not an exception, and we also have systematic oppositions. And in Germany, we usually call them querdenkers. It means those who think differently. And they are being blamed for the connections with the far right on the ideological basis. But the ones who are participating in this movement decline all of this, especially in the social sphere. This is a conflict line, the discussion whether it's a far right movement or not and on the internet as well. The ones who are sympathizing with the movement continue to say that it's not connected with the far-right movement. They're just saying that this is a new social movement, this new social phenomenon. The liberal union of different people who are fighting for their civil rights. In order to understand whether it's so or not, to the extent that this 10 minutes allow us, we need to answer several questions. What is the structure of this movement, whether it's homogeneous or heterogeneous, and what is the role of far right in the protests against the fight of the COVID-19 spread? The structure of the German core thinkers. This is quite a heterogeneous community. The fact itself that it's not agreeing with the measures made by the government is not something that is anti-democratic or far right. This is actually a legitimate element of the social discussions, especially if this is connected with the opinion of medical society. In the year 2021, the politicians of the Freedom Democratic Party, these are the liberals who cannot be connected to the radicals, and they will definitely be part of the coalition that is being created in Germany. First of all, they have different opinions about the problem, about the virus. We can talk about three groups. The first one is the ones who accept the danger of the virus, but think that the measures are either the mistake or something not completely right, because everything could be done without the lockdown. The second group are the ones who accept the existence of the virus, but think that it's not dangerous. They usually compare it with the seasonal flu. And so according to the point of view of this group, the limitation of the rights and freedoms of the society is even criminal. And this discussion is going on in Russia as well. And the third group, the ones who support the conspirological theory, and they think that the pandemic is very artificial, that there is actually some sort of conspirology. And the main distinction between the second and third group is that the second group critique certain factors. For example, that there is no need in the masks and the vaccines, and at the same time they are blaming the government and the incompetency. And the third group are actually thinking that everything was created in advance. And so this movement cannot have a certain leadership, a single leadership. They don't have their own leaders, they don't have authorities. They have certain important individuals. It's first of all Mikhail Palvik, the organizer of the anti-COVID demonstrations, and Boda Shifter. He is an institute doctor who was the one who was giving the permissions of not wearing masks under medical conditions without even testing the person. And he was saying that there are no new cases or death cases of the corona. Another important factor is the readiness of this group to actively show their position. And it's not only limited by the discussions on the internet. The classical example is the participation in the demonstrations. In this case, the problem is the huge amount of people. This is connected with different factors. Not every single person who supports these ideas is ready to actively show it. Other people don't want to be associated with the far right movement. And another important part is the step-by-step measures of canceling or easing up some measures. The main figures of the COVID dissidents can barely create a demonstration of several thousands of people, even though they're doing a lot of efforts and spending a lot of money on including the public into this movement, including different advertisement on the social media or different flyers and etc. So Corona skeptics and far right, I would divide this problem into two parts. The first problem is the ideological closeness to the far right, and another one is the interconnection and penetration of these two groups. The first one is the third group, the conspirologists, actually close to far right. They think that there is some sort of global government who want to control the whole world. Of course, traditionally they're talking about Jewish people. So this is a combination of neo-Nazis, the anti-Semites. On the previous demonstrations, the society was marking the anti-Semite slogans. They're in some sort of way talking about different far-right movements. The slogans of 7-Eleven, which is the phone code of Stuttgart, are connected with the far-right movements. They also have a lot of positions that are connected with the racial positions. They're also connected with the alternative party, and they also duplicate the slogans of that party, and they're saying that the democracy should be substituted with dictatorship. Barik and other 100 activists of the movement participate with the Reichsbürgers, who are accepted as far right and are responsible for the kill of the policeman several years ago. The Dr. Schiffmer, who I also mentioned, is connected with the very famous Swiss far right Berter. And second and the last one is the penetration of these two groups. The organization of Corona skeptics were saying on social media they are not supporting the far right movement, but at the same time they were not doing any efforts in order to separate itself from the movement, including the topic of the symbols. So all these three groups, NDPG, correct and right movement, sent their representatives, and they were showing their elements, so-called military right flags, given that the Nazi symbols are prohibited in Germany. They were using the military flag, but everyone understands what's behind that flag and what parties use these symbols. On every event, ordiners are participating in this event. They have the opportunity not to let unwanted people participate in these events. In 2020, there was a demonstration of the representatives of clubs, restaurants, and other places like this, but at the same time, there were no participants of the far right movement. And the ones who were creating that demonstration said that no representatives of far right movement are going to participate here and will not be allowed to that event. The heterogeneous character of this group is also supported by different authorities, and the federal authorities started controlling that group. And at the same time, they're saying that Corona dissidents are not part of the far right movement officially, but there are definitely some representatives of the far right movement. So the short conclusion is that we cannot say that every supporter of the Querdenker is a far right supporter. Of course, there are different people, and some of the people can be part of the far right movement, but we cannot not pay attention to the fact that the queer thinker is definitely connected with the far-right movement. Of course, there are several very prominent representatives of this movement, and of course, they're very moderate towards the far-right movement. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, and it's very interesting it's important to know what is happening in Germany when we're speaking about radical right. So now we are flying to Greece, to the sun. It would be good to hear Dr. Pranvera Tika. She's a researcher at the University of Athens in Greece, and she will speak about she will answer to the question: contemporary extremists in Greece, new trends or old trend? Dr. Tika, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the organizer for this conference, and it's a privilege and a great honor to be in this panel. So I'm going to share my screen. No. Second. So it's okay?
Okay.
So I'm going to present far-right extremism in Greece since 2010 and nowadays. Far-right extremism traditionally, from the fall of the military dictatorship in 1974 till 2010, was a rather marginal phenomenon. In this period of time, from the fall of the military dictatorship until 2010, there were certain, of course, certain movement type configurations, such as National Political Union or EPEN, and United Nationalist Movement, ANEC, that were mostly concentrated in street fight mostly against leftists. There was also a neo-Nazi formation, the Popular Association, Golden Dawn, that was present since 1980, but emerged in the period of the financial crisis in 2010. Golden Dawn entered in parliament in May 2012 with 6.97% of the votes. It had a nationwide support in both urban and rural areas. It was a militia-like party, and it was organized around the Führer principle. Its views towards foreign policies were irredentists, and violence was considered as effective means for giving answers and solutions to different problems of that time. Violent activism was targeted mostly toward migrants, refugees, people of color, Jews, LGBT community members, etc. Golden Dawn was responsible for many violent attacks and deaths in Greece. And one principle that guided its action was that Greece should be inhabited only by Aryan Greek people. On the causes of its rise, there are a lot of different theoretical assumptions. The first assumption, theoretical assumption, is that Golden Dawn proposed an own nationalist solution vis-a-vis the memoranda signed by Greece with Troika. There was Also, there is also another theoretical formulation that is concentrated on the supply side theory. Golden Dawn crafted a strategy of creating strongholds within Greece in order to gain visibility, presence, and influence. Also, there are other explanations, such as that of demand side, meaning that it was the economic vulnerability of social groups that had lost their ties to political parties and who sought to vote punitively. Also, they were the losers of the economic crisis and the economic adjustment that Greece had to make. There is also another explanation concentrated on a set of attitudes such as authoritarianism, political cynicism, etc. Its activism waned and its electoral percentages fell. The judicial investigation into Golden Dawn, the indictment, and finally the imprisonment of its leader and a large number of leading members on the charge of participating in a criminal organization in October 2012. Also, there is another explanation about the failure of the Golden Dawn, that was the suspension of state funding. And now we move to another context of crisis that Greece is experiencing, and is the pandemic. And in the context of the pandemic crisis, there is an attempt to rebuild far-right extremism. In the continuum of the poverty and delegitimization of the institutions and Presp's agreement with the strong violent rallies in North Greece, the refugee issue, mainly the island of Aegean that was replaced with the issue of the pandemic. In this context, the pandemic reconfigured another face of the far-right extremism. There are demonstrations from 2020 and till now against the use of masks in streets, in schools, in a context of nostalgia for the past. Also, combined with messages against Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and in the gap that was left by the Golden Dawn, there is being recorded a high mobility in the concentric circles of the far-right, traditional Greek far-right. Existing organizations are trying to take advantage of the collapse of the Golden Dawn in order to attract people to their ranks. These groups are more extreme than the Golden Dawn. A secret report of the Hellenic police refers to 16 organizations, and it is the action is concentrated mainly on the north of Greece, and in Thessaloniki is their stronghold. They are mainly concentrated in the youth. Violent acts in schools against leftist, anti-fascist activists are some of their targets. Such groups are the Association of Ethno-Tribal Regeneration, which, as they claim, was created in a period of obvious universal decay and general dissolution. Also, another organization is Holy Corps, Pro Patria, Independent Nationalists, Vanguard, Hellas, etc. And their main idea is that Greeks are superior than other categories of people living in Greece. we are seeing a trend from party mobilization to mobilization as a movement. They engage at the external part of the formal process of decision-making. The activity is focused on street rallies, demonstrations. They use a digital space to diffuse ideas and to receive support, and they use violence in order to entrench a climate of fear and animosity. The right-wing landscape is rather solid in their ideas and modus operandi. Different subcurrents united in their rejection of diversity, pluralism, and democracy. They espouse the idea of Greek superiority, as I said, and the ideas of neo-Nazism. We are, to conclude with, we are seeing the same old trend with actors, new and old actors employing the old logic of violent extremism of Golden Dawn, but also employing different strategies and partnerships. Thank you very much.
Thanks. If I may, I have a question. Those extremists, what do they think about Europe? They want to, like the English, to do a Brexit, but a Grexit, something like that. They want to stop with Europe.
Yes, as neo-Nazis' ideas and the set of ideas that Golden Dawn embraced, they are against Europe, the establishment of Europe, but also the political establishment in Greece. They concentrate their efforts in using the violence and in proselytizing new members, mainly from youth categories of the population in Greece. We don't know much about these groups because they are they function in a gray zone, and they are not very observable now.
Okay, thanks a lot. So now, thanks, Dr. Tika, it was very interesting. So now we're going to United Kingdom with Dr. William Arshon. And Dr. Arshon is the Associate Director of the Center of the Analysis of Radical Right, and he will speak about xenophobia and radicalization in the UK. Please, you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Dr. William Morcott. I'm the Associate Director of the Centre for the Analysis of Radical Right. Very sorry that I couldn't be with you guys today at the conference hosted by Dr. Valeria Ingor and the Centre for Extremism and Radicalism Studies. Today I'm going to present a recording of a report that I was commissioned to write by Dr. Ingor as part of a project looking broadly at xenophobia and radicalism in the OSCE countries. So I'm going to present about kind of the state of xenophobia and some of the policies relating to that and other things like anti-discrimination, for example, and also connect that with the picture in Britain that we're seeing in terms of radicalisation, both on the far right as well as Islamist extremism being the two kind of dominant threat pictures when it comes to extremism in the UK. Let me just quickly move on to the next slide. So yeah, at the time of writing the report, there's kind of three key themes emerging in UK's public life, which has emboldened xenophobic and radical movements in the past few years. The first is kind of a polarization, which is connected to Brexit. So extending from divisions between pro-Remain and Leave. You've obviously heard of kind of that kind of division also mapping onto attitudes around cosmopolitanism versus a more kind of nationalistic or kind of particularistic form of identity, and that's kind of extended into what some people probably call it like a culture war. And then the last two is this theme of stigmatization, so people feeling like they're being kind of victimized or marginalized, which connects to grievances around the far right, and racialization in terms of people being kind of and struggling with issues of kind of the post-racist era that is kind of prevailing in public debates. This idea of kind of that we've settled the race question in the UK, which scholars of critical race scholars would perhaps laugh at slightly. So we've seen expressions of this on the streets with the country nationalist, kind of anti-Islam section of the UK far right in 2020, especially in reaction to Black Lives Matters protests in London. Also, there's been during the summer these issues around migrants crossing from Calais to Dover, that has emboldened a lot of vigilantism amongst these movements. Another kind of worrying aspect on the kind of extreme far right has been neo-Nazism and the rise of individuals who want to accelerate a race war through violent means. So we've seen lots of court cases and arrests and referrals to Britain's kind of government de-radicalization programs based on that, especially amongst very young men. And then kind of tackle this kind of fairly doomy kind of intro picture that I'm serving to you during the reporting period is the backdrop of developments around COVID-19 and how extremist actors have been using this as a form of soft recruitment, and how we see this weird coalescence with other conspiracy type actors on the left, and this broad coalition of conspiratorial thinking and disinformation that Laura has become a part of. So I think the responses of government, of political parties and policy practitioners are obviously very central to this, and this is something I'll go into in the presentation time that I have left. So during the period of review, when we're thinking about changes in legislation related to kind of minorities, there was no kind of substantial change in UK legislation, more kind of rhetorical pledges and kind of policy debates going on. Connected to Black Lives Matter, in 2020, Boris Johnson pledged that the government would connect what's called levelling up agenda, which is basically attempts to kind of redress imbalances between the South, economically prosperous South in the UK, and the more kind of economically disadvantaged North, connecting that into an agenda to help the life chances of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. This is building off his predecessor Theresa May's efforts. Also, debates raised around legislation concerning the ability of transgender people to self-identify both in the Scottish and Westminster Parliament, but with no kind of major conclusion. There was no legislation forward kind of about that. This didn't, however, stop an appetite for reform, and actually subnationally within the UK, there was kind of actions to kind of boost the gender representation on public boards in Scotland, as well as a kind of addition to hate crime legislation in Scotland that would add a new category of stirring up hatred, slightly more looser one. And we've also seen south of the border in England debates around kind of hateful extremism, so not kind of just terroristic violence perhaps being or kind of material being kind of sanctioned, but also kind of more broader efforts by actors to start hatred. Looking at law enforcement practices, comparatively, the UK has been fairly robust in identifying individuals on the road to radicalisation, and enacting more downstream measures to prescribe terrorist organisations themselves. So we had several far-right neo-Nazi organisations being prescribed during the 2018-2020 period. Feuerkrieg Division, for example, Sonnenkrieg Division, and a few other offshoots of the National Action neo-Nazi terror organisation. Also, what was interesting is that despite public debates that have shown the toxicity of government de-radicalisation programmes in the UK, it's called PREVENT. It's one of the strands of the broader counter-terrorism strategy by the Home Office. Actual kind of third-party polls suggested that it actually had strong support, and it's often cited because of its kind of multi-sector approach to leading individuals out of being radicalised. It's been suggested in international circles as being kind of a gold standard for government programmes. What we also saw during the period was broad parity between those referred to the Channel programme as part of PREVENT, between radical right extremists, Islamist extremists, and the UK also seeing kind of the terror threat picture, especially on the radical right, worsening during this period, according to Europol's figures. One sizable story that also connects to kind of minorities and anti-discrimination during the reporting period was around the use of facial recognition technology and stop and search techniques, the former being deemed to amplify racial discrimination and stifle freedom of expression. On the racial discrimination picture, for example, a lot of the algorithms trained to spot individuals who might be involved in criminal activity were trained mainly on white people, so they weren't very accurate picking up minority individuals, and this is being kind of piloted in the UK, but not so far kind of rolled out. In terms of hate crime, sentences have increased during the reporting period. Initially a 13.6% increase and then a 12.5% increase in the reporting period.
William, sorry, if you can, you have 3 minutes to stop it, okay? Because you spoke 10 minutes, so can you speak another 3 minutes?
Actually, as part of that, if we drill into the statistics themselves, there's been a drop in terms of the completed cases and pre-charge decisions themselves. So it's not a kind of unanimously glorious picture. There's still also issues with hate crime in the UK around confidence among minorities for reporting and differences in hate crime recording practices as well. Some police forces kind of log things like misogynistic hate crime, some others don't. And we've also seen a decline in the amount of charged kind of hate crimes being recorded for religion, which might have something to do also with not a natural decline, but a decline in confidence connected to the BLM moment that the UK experienced in 2020, according to latest figures. So just to carry on and get towards the end of this presentation, there's been a paradox in the UK since Brexit, specifically around an increase in pro-migrant views, but also concerning levels of prejudice against against Muslims, against Jewish people. This is so the pro-immigration piece is perhaps explained by the cessation of the UK's membership of the EU. For people who are concerned, this issue is being dealt with, for example. In terms of the uptick of anti-Jewish prejudice, this could relate to anti-Semitism related to the left. That's become quite a sad area of politics. And in terms of anti-Muslim prejudice, this relates to the first point on the slide. We often see this increase. It increased after the Christchurch attack in the UK, for example, but it tends to increase whenever there's a terror attack more generally.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, William. So can we go to Dr. Maxim Bishkov? He is Associate Professor of the Moscow Economic Institute, but he will speak about the political extremism in Ireland in the last century. Please.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые участники конференции.
Good afternoon, dear participants of the conference. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I will open my presentation. So I hope that you can see my presentation. My topic is political extremism in the history of Ireland in the 20th century. The political development of Ireland in the 20th century was defined by the desire of the Irish government and society to achieve full independence, and it stimulated the development of Irish nationalism. But different understanding of this definition and also different aims of it led to different forms of it, from moderate to the radical one. The central event that affected the political landscape of that region was the partition of the Ireland that was done on the basis of the Anglo-Irish contract signed on 6th of December of 1921. So this year actually celebrates the 100th anniversary. And this contract divided the island into the Northern Ireland that was under the rule of the English crown and the Irish Free State that received the status of British Dominion.
Sorry, Maxim, do you have a problem with your PowerPoint?
Не видно, да?
You can see it.
Yes, but it's like a light.
Прыгает. Она вся
Прыгает.
You can see the presentation, but it's jumpy.
На втором стриме.
So please go on, Max.
Это может без презентации? Без презентации.
Then maybe I can do it without the presentation. The technician will come to you and will help you, but you can continue. Okay, so the thing is that the agreement of 1921 divided not only the Irish territory, it also divided the Irish society, what led into the Irish Civil War of 1922-23, where the supporters of the Dominion status united around the political party of Cumann Nagel and the supporters of the full independence of the country, represented by the Irish Republican Army and the political party Sinn Féin, collided. On the 27th of April 1923, the Cumann Nagel won, and it shows the full support of the Irish Free State. And on the 6th of April, the parliament ratified the agreement. So the society was actually supporting the independent state of the country, but on the 13th of April 1922, military regiments of IRA captured different administrative buildings of Dublin, and that's how the Irish Civil War started. The Imán de Valera, who was actually the president of the self-proclaimed republic, he said that he is against the military resistance, and he creates his own party, Fianna Fáil. As a result of it, the representatives of Sinn Féin became the supporters of the Irish independence, and the supporters of the radical measures stayed in Sinn Féin. The political party of Monte Valera took the majority of seats in the parliament and became the first one in the parliament. And the thing is that Fianna Fáil decided to achieve Irish independence step by step, and that's when the Irish Republic Army is being created as an organization of the extremist approach. The thing is that during the 20th year, the representatives of Russia started participating in Russia and started participating in different international events organized by different organizations. And in 1927, in November, one of the leaders of the IRA and the president of the Society of Friends of Russia, Franz Patrick, visited Russian Union to celebrate the October Revolution. And the IRA participates in the organization of far left political organizations. They are trying to create their own political organization. In 1931, it's Free Ireland, but the radical positions of that organization led to the fact that this organization had a very limited social basis, and we can say that South Air becomes a far left political party, and this radicalism of South Air led to the fact that this organization was not supported by the Irish society. And in 1934, because of that, another attempt to create to create a political organization of the IRA. This is the creation of the Congress of the party, and it also failed.
Фианафол пришла к власти, то Эмон де Валера хотел, в общем, то, что...
Imon de Valera wanted to do the following thing. He wanted to consolidate the
Ряда как раз именно членов
via amnestia. But in the 30s, we have
с одной стороны, оформляется крайне право, это синорубашечники, хотя, в принципе, называть их, может быть, фашистами, ирландскими фашистами, это спорный вопрос. А с другой стороны, как раз ирландская республиканская армия, которая действует самостоятельно, и как военная, и как политическая сила. И, в общем-то, как раз именно ирландская республиканская армия приводили к тому, что постепенно начинается дестабилизация ситуации в стране. И в 1936 году
sees the destabilization of the country.
Ирландская республиканская армия была
government of Imona de Valera. So this
Северной Ирландии.
army was banned, so it's moved to the Northern Ireland and Great Britain. But here we need to take into account that some terrorist attacks are still performed on the territory of Ireland. So, as you know, Ireland took
Имона де Валера проводит еще более осторожную политику, чтобы в ирландском обществе не укреплялись позиции, ориентированные.
Even more cautious
в связи с тем, что как раз
policy, and they looked at the Nazis and at the UK, and Iraq was an ally of the fascists, so the government took more pressure on this party, this movement. After the Second World War, Iraq continued its actions on the UK territory and in Ireland. Again, these are the attempts to create their own political organizations. One of them was a failure. A more successful attempt was to create a political organization, which happened in 1957. So this is, again, in the second part of the 20th century, we see the divisions in the party. So the agreement of 1920 defined and determined the more moderate actions. The government took and performed some political reforms aimed at the independence of Ireland. They were represented by the almost the fascist party, and they tried to create a Soviet republic, though due to the backlash from the population, it made them move to more terrorist measures. Extremist measures represents violence and represent the violent attitude and violent approach. Well, this is all I wanted to say in the time given to me. If there are any questions, I would be glad to answer them.
Okay, thanks a lot, Maxim. So can we go back to Dr. Arshon to hear the end of his intervention? No.
Я хочу сказать, что это не было выступление доктора Алчерна.
This is not the statement by Dr. Alcorn. Unfortunately, he can't. It was a video message, so he can't participate right now. So he participated virtually, like online. It was a recorded message.
Okay. So, do you have any question for the panelists? Oh, okay. So if there are no questions, so thanks very much for all the panelists. It was very interesting. And we saw that we have the same problems with the extremists in Europe. So now at 4:15 Russian time, you can go to, you have the choice to be in the same channel to hear about extremism in Russia and to go to the first channel and you will hear about the extremism in the States. So thanks a lot. And I was very happy to moderate this panel. And again, thanks to Valerie to organize the very...
Спасибо большое, Эрик.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you for being the moderator.